righty. Okay, so I'm ready to introduce our first speaker of the day. Today's first presenter is Nathalie Niddam. She's joining us from Canada today. She is the host of the Longevity Podcast with Nathalie Niddam. She's a speaker and longevity educator. Niddam is a holistic nutritionist and longevity educator, a trailblazer in the sphere of longevity and health span, focusing on strategies that range from health tech to ancestral health to resilience training. Nathalie is dedicated to helping us all live full and vibrant lives well into our 50s and 60s. Nathalie has a deep expertise about bioregulator peptides, leading-edge compounds with the power to awaken the body's innate rejuvenation system. That's what she's going to be talking to us today about. This groundbreaking field is a cornerstone on her approach, has science and holistic care, can and do come together to create real and meaningful results. If you were to Radfest this year, you would have heard her speaking in the Women's Longevity Breakout Lab. And so I'm very, very excited to get to welcome her to People Unlimited. Please welcome Nathalie. When we're unmuting you, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I think the system had me in as a viewer, so I wasn't able to unmute my mic. Anyway, thank you so much for the introduction. I think I would add that my goal is to help us live vibrantly and healthily far beyond our 50s and 60s, well into our 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond that. So thank you so much for having me, and happy holidays to everyone here, whatever you celebrate and have been celebrating and are going to be celebrating. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I'm going to just share my slides. Here we go. Share. Oh, look at that. No technological glitches. Here we go. So basically, as Mariana said, I'm going to be talking about bioregulator peptides. I can't see most of you. Actually, I can see the room. In the people in the room, I can mostly sort of see you from afar. How many of you are familiar with or are currently using bioregulators as part of your youthfulness regimen? I see a couple of hands. There we go. Oh yeah, there's hands. Love it. Okay, great. Amazing. So most of this probably you may have heard before, but I think that this is a very, very exciting time to be in this space. So today we're going to do a very short introduction to amino acid complexes, which is essentially what you're going to be seeing, at least the natural extracts of bioregulators. The nomenclature is going to change a little bit. The FDA is not loving, the current FDA is not loving the bioregulator or the peptide word. Possibly this will change over time or in the near future with your new administration. But in any event, if you hear me referring to amino acid complexes, I mean bioregulators. And sometimes, most of the time, I will slip to bioregulators. We're going to talk about how these amino acid complexes can positively impact the aging process. We're going to do a spotlight on the top 6 and where they fit into a comprehensive longevity plan. And we're going to talk about setting the stage for optimizing your results with these amino acid complexes. So, you know, in the news, I think all of us here are very, very aware and waiting with bated breath to see what the new administration brings to the table in the US in particular. The last administration, certainly the FDA was starting to get pretty crabby about the whole peptide space, and even bioregulators were starting to get swept up. Like I think we all saw when they issued that mandate, what was it, over a year ago now. Even Epidolon got kind of caught up in there. And so it'll be interesting. Now they've already kind of backed off on a couple of the peptide compounds. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward where that goes. I just came back from A4M not too long ago. I would imagine a number of you were there as well. And what we're seeing is a growing number of bioregulator products and also delivery mechanisms. So I think that there's a race on to make these, whether it's bioregulators or regular peptides, there's a huge race to make them available transdermally and also sublingually. So it's going to be I think this year is going to be huge. I think we're going to see a lot of new products, a lot of new players. What's going to be more interesting is to see how they measure up against the tried and true. And also, like I said, explosion of entries in the market as the news gets out. And really, I think the big question is, will the research keep pace? The best research that we have access to right now was done by Professor Cavinson over the last 3 to 4 decades. And I think that as people are bringing out new products, there's going to be a lot of assumptions made that these products work the same as the ones that he researched for a really long time. So I just think it'll be really interesting to see how much people lean into the research and what the results are that we see clinically as people start to use these different products. So I don't, this is nothing new to you guys. Life expectancy in 2023, we see the United States, and I don't think anybody in this room really falls into this category here. This is your general run-of-the-mill population, average life expectancy around just under 80 years old, ranking 47th. My guess is People Unlimited members probably skew a hell of a lot higher than that, but that is the state of the nation currently. And we know that for most people, frailty really is a massive part of aging. And what we really want and what we know is possible is that we can make our future years our best years. And the truth is that where we are is in this era of the possibility of biological age reversal. And everybody's talking about reversing their biological age. And the tools that we have at our disposal are growing with every passing minute. We've got the exploding field of regenerative medicine. We've got gene therapies, things like companies like MiniCircle that are developing strategies to embed using plasmids to embed genes that then secrete for 2 years. So we've got the follistatin gene therapy. They've got Clotho coming down the pipes. GHK probably won't be far behind. So we're getting into a world where people are, and it's becoming more and more accessible for people to access these types of gene therapies to turn on genes that are either underactive or that have become less active with advanced age. We know stem cell therapy and exosomes is exploding as well as a field. We've got things like plasmapheresis and excuse my spelling. I should have checked the spelling. That doesn't look right to me. And then, of course, we've got bioregulators, which is a whole other area, once again, renamed to amino acid complexes. So the diseases of aging that we see, obviously, we have metabolic syndrome is epidemic. We've got cancer, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease. These are the big four. And at the end of the day, what we really want to be looking at is what can we do to prevent these? Prevention is the key, right? And even though I would say that treatment is for people who are willing to go into the regenerative space, treatment has really exploded as well. But what we really want is not go there in the first place. So why do we age in the first place? We have all our theories of aging. I know that that in this group here, this whole idea of broken programming or DNA that just doesn't perform the way it used to. And why is that happening? But every one of these things, fundamentally, every one of these hallmarks of aging, which, there's 12 now. I know that there's a bunch more coming down the pipes. Ultimately, these are all things that used to work really, really well that have just stopped doing what they're supposed to be doing in the human body. And we know that the human body is capable of healing and regenerating. So what can we do to reawaken that ability in the body? What's interesting about this little diagram here, and I don't think the source is here, but this was a really cool diagram because it's referring to a few compounds that we're aware of that actually can be quite effective at addressing some of these hallmarks of aging. I will bring your attention to this brown line and SPD. Anybody want to take a stab at what that stands for? Okay, I can't hear you anyway. It's spermidine. So, spermidine, an endogenous compound, actually has a positive impact on every one of the hallmarks of aging that are known at this time. The next contestant that probably hits the most marks, I would say, is probably NMN, and then resveratrol with calcium alpha ketoglutarate coming in a distant fourth. But ultimately, I think it's really interesting to me that spermidine, which is naturally made in the human body, is the leader in this. Whoops. Next. There we go. All right. So in addition to there are, I think the last time I researched there were hundreds of different theories of aging. The theory of aging we're going to go with today is the peptide theory of aging. And it was ultimately developed, and I don't know if you guys can see the bottom reference here. I've got a bunch of icons in front of it. And this is Professor Kavinson. This is his theory of aging. And that is ultimately that these little bioregulator peptides that are endogenous to the human body, your body makes them when you're younger. As they decrease in numbers as we age, we lose the ability to regenerate and to renew as we go. So he says it in much fancier words than I do, but fundamentally, at the end of the day, this is what this is all about. So we're talking about short peptides. We're talking about, in terms of their method of action, these peptides ultimately regulate gene expression and protein synthesis. So they are your fundamental epigenetic switches. And I know that Dr. Melissa Peterson, who's coming up after me, is going to talk about the epigenetic influence, like what is it in our environment, and maybe not even just the environment, not things that are not self, that is fundamentally flipping genes on and off and driving this aging process. They also stimulate proliferation and differentiation, suppress cell apoptosis. They can also do that in order to restore the function of various organs. In animal studies, they've actually been shown, and this is in Kavinson's research, to reduce the incidence and severity of cancer. And in human studies, they've been shown to increase vitality, reduce mortality of elderly and senile age persons. So I'm going to apologize here because this slide should have been animated and it's not. So here's the man himself. Tragically, we lost Professor Kavinson, I guess a year ago now. It's almost a year ago to the day that Professor Kavinson passed away tragically. But his entire life's work was bioregulator peptides. He discovered them. He teased them out in the lab. He modeled them, and then he found ways to extract them from animal tissues and organs, and then eventually was even able to start to do the work on the synthetic bioregulators that we'll talk about as well. So what are these things? These are essentially 2 to 4 amino acid chains in some cases, and the research is continuing to happen in different camps these days. And there's always been research, being done in other labs. He's done the lion's share of the work. But what we're starting to hear and see is that some of these bioregulator peptides can be as long as 7 amino acids in length. But for the most part, what we're going to talk about today are 2 to 4 amino acids long. And they are ultimately very powerful epigenetic switches that restore homeostasis and a youthful gene expression. Now, the homeostasis thing is really important to remember, because that is part of why bioregulator peptides are really considered to have quite a good safety profile. Come on. There we go. We know that endogenous levels of these bioregulators are high when we're young, as all good things, and that they drop as we age. So where do we get them from, and what else do they do? So there's 2 sources of amino acid complexes or bioregulators. They can be extracted from animal tissue and organs. And what I mean by that is, particularly in the case of Professor Kavinson's and most of the natural peptides that you will find out in the market right now, these have been extracted from either bovine, so either cows or pigs, porcine, or I forget the word for sheep, but there's a special INE word for sheep. any of those three, so mammalian sources, they will extract the bioregulator peptides from those tissues, glands, and organs. And we're going to talk about why this is important, because they are not just getting the 2 to 4 amino acid sequence here. And then they can be synthetically derived. So now, and there's actually a new source, which I think kind of straddles the mammalian sourced and the synthetically derived. So the synthetically derived is literally in a lab. They are going to recreate exactly that 2 to 4 amino acid chain and create a complex that can then be lyophilized and then reconstituted. Now, those synthetic bioregulators, we are starting to see them come available. Well, they've been around for a while, actually, as a transdermal product, as a sublingual product, and of course, as a subcutaneous injection is the most common. And then the extracts from animal tissues can either be taken orally, or they can be, in some cases, used as intramuscular injections. But those are typically not available outside of Russia, or very hard to find. So how do they actually work? How do they get to where they're going? Well, they have the ability, these bioregulators, these tiny little proteins, have the ability to get across the cellular and mitochondrial membranes. So they literally get into the cell, they move into the mitochondria, and this is into the nucleus of the cell. And this is where they're going to bind to DNA and epigenetically switch on, right? They're going to switch on they're going to switch on the ability or the signal to produce proteins. And at this level, what they're doing is they're driving rejuvenation and restoration at a cellular level in that specific targeted tissue and organ. So we're going to talk about what those are as well in a second. All right. So currently, we have 21 different bioregulators or amino acid complexes commercially available in the market. One more. There, 7. And you can see that we have covered pretty much all of the majors here. And there are even there are 5 of these that are not available as synthetics. So they are the adrenal gland, they are the, let me see, adrenals, I believe bone marrow, kidney, muscle, and one more. Let me just see, liver, lungs, blood vessel, pineal. I'm going to have to think about this one. There's a 5th one that is not available as a synthetic, but every one of these is available, obviously, as a natural extract. So they are also, you're also going to start to see them in complexes, so 3 at a time. For the most part, when we're using bioregulator peptides, we're using them in stacks. We typically don't use one at a time. We typically will combine them, and so that we get synergistic effects. And I'm going to get into what some of those stacks look like in a minute. So I said that I was going to share my top 6. Now, the truth of the matter is that top 6 is a relative term, because if you have a problem with a specific organ, that's going to be one of your top 6. But when we're looking at healthy aging, these are the ones that I really think are the big players. So we have the pineal bioregulator, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. It's the pineal gland bioregulator. It is called epitalon, and it features, in addition to many other activities, it helps to activate telomerase, which helps to restore and maintain the length of telomeres. It helps to normalize melatonin levels. And it does this particularly in elderly people, where people who've seen a drop in their melatonin production, when they use Epitalon, they will see a normalization of their melatonin production. And I know I don't need to tell this crowd how important melatonin is. It's not just about sleep. This is your most important antioxidant in the body. It also helps to restore circadian rhythms. If we can do that, all kinds of things start to go well for us in health. And then finally, of course, as a master endocrine regulator, so can help to, from a top-down approach, kind of reset the whole endocrine system. And this is why you will very often in the stacks, if I'm working with someone, let's say, where we feel that maybe there's some issues with adrenals or thyroid, we will often include the pineal gland bioregulator in that stack because it'll support the what we're trying to restore in terms of balance and function with those organs. Okay, well, let's just move through them. Next, we have the thymus gland bioregulator. Whoops. No, go back. One sec. Can I go back? Yes. Okay, thymus gland bioregulator ultimately helps to support the immune function by restoring function to the seat of immunity. What's interesting about the thymus gland bioregulator is when we get into the synthetics, we start to see a bunch of different bioregulators come up. And I think that that's because what's happened is we've identified a number of different bioregulators within the thymus gland extract. So you'll see things like thymogen, you'll see things like thymolin, and thymolin would be the most powerful of the synthetic thymus gland bioregulators. And that one is the hardest one to find. You're going to see it available in a lot of research labs, but it actually isn't it's not actual thymolin. For most of them, it's thymulin, which is a different compound. The one place I found to get thymolin reliably is a company called Cosmic Nootropics, and they're bringing this in from Russia. You'll get the box. It's got the Russian writing on it, the whole 9 yards. And I will tell you that when I feel myself coming down with something, if I can hit it early enough with thymolin, it is amazing how much shorter, or if I get sick at all, how much more quickly I move through things. Then in our top 6, of course, we have the blood vessel bioregulator. Because why? Because if we can keep the blood vessels healthy, and I'm talking not just the large blood vessels, but right down to the capillaries, this is about delivering nutrients to the cell and removing waste products. And if we can do that efficiently, then this is a big piece of the puzzle. And imagine that you can just keep reconditioning that endothelium by repeating cycles of the blood vessel bioregulator, whether it's every 3 months, twice a year, depending on your age and your stage and what you've got going on. This is like a crucial piece of the puzzle when we're looking at whether it's reversing aging or maintaining youthfulness. So next one, we've got the brain or the central nervous system bioregulator. So we have the name cortexin up here. To make it really confusing, the synthetic version of the brain bioregulator is called pineolon. And I will tell you that the naming of these bioregulators has been the bane of my existence because there's so much confusion. I'm actually going to get into it a little bit more in a future slide. But this bioregulator is about going after the whole central nervous system. It has been used in Russia to address brain trauma, neurodegenerative conditions, as well as retinal issues. Now, this is really, really interesting. Both the pineal gland bioregulator and the brain or CNS bioregulator, both of these bioregulators are really important for vision. It's not a shocker because, of course, our eyes are an extension of our brain. But in Russia, when they're working with people with conditions like, for example, retinitis pigmentosa, I don't know how many of you know what that is, but that is a genetic condition where the person's field of vision narrows and narrows so that they inevitably become blind when they age. The protocols that they use to treat that, where they've actually shown the ability to stabilize and in some cases improve vision in something that is believed to be not possible to improve. Their part of the protocol is that pineal gland and the pineal, as well as the brain central nervous system bioregulators. So both those bioregulators really, really important also for vision. Then, of course, liver. We know nothing good happens in the body without a healthy liver. So the liver bioregulator has actually been used clinically in Russia to treat hepatitis and other liver conditions. I have seen it in the populations of people, like in all of my membership communities. I've seen people with elevated liver enzymes, do a few rounds of the liver bioregulator, and assuming that they've also addressed whatever it is that's driving those liver enzymes in the first place, we will often see a massive improvement in liver enzymes. And finally, Cartilax, the cartilage bioregulator. And a lot of people would sit there would say, well, Nat, don't you think that the heart or the lungs are more important? And like I said, this is a little bit like choosing your favorite child. But the reason why I pick Cartilax is because look at what it does. It upregulates the production of elastin and elastin and collagen. And that means not only does it speak to cartilage, but it also speaks to every single organ in the body that expands and contracts. And that means it's important for your blood vessels, it's important for your heart, it's important for your kidneys, it's important for your lungs. So this is as far upstream as you can go. And again, think of it. If we want to live into our 90s and our hundreds and beyond, wherever we want to go, all of these tissues have to remain flexible and malleable and responsive. All right. Whoops. We've jumped way ahead here. Sorry. Let me just find my spot. Oh dear. Okay. Sorry about this. You get to see my whole presentation in reverse. How exciting. Okay, so I was wanting to, okay, I mentioned the naming problem. So the naming problem, each bioregulator has fundamentally at least 3 names. And as an example, I'm going to talk about the pineal gland bioregulator. It is called epitalon when we are talking about the synthetic form. So this is the pineal gland bioregulator that's been synthesized in a lab. And this can be used subcutaneously, sublingually, or transdermally, depending on the product. It's even available as a spray. Then we have endolutin. Endolutin is the actual extract from tissues, glands, and organs of animals that has been now cleaned up and formulated and put into capsules. So, for example, we have a brand called Nature's Marvels that many of you may have seen, especially if you were at RadFest or if you've listened to any of my other talks. That's available through a company in the UK called Profound Health. They're actually opening a warehouse in the States come February. So we'll be able to get the Nature's Marvels products from them without waiting a couple of weeks for them to come overseas. But that is endolutin. Endolutin is your natural extract that is orally bioavailable. And finally, we have epithalamin, which is an intramuscular extract. This is really hard to get outside of Russia. This is actually what Cavinson used in the studies that I'm going to talk about in a minute. The reason why it's important for me to make this distinction and for you to remember the distinction between the names is because the form of bioregulator that you use is going to have a massive impact on the dosing. So epitalon, the synthetic, for just run-of-the-mill maintenance dosing, you're looking at 100 micrograms a day. Maybe you might go up to 1 milligram a day if you're trying to move the needle on something, but that's pretty much as high as you'll go. On endolutin, the oral extract, you're looking at 10 milligrams a day. And for the longest time, people thought that epitalon dosing was 10 milligrams a day. And it was poor translation from the Russian literature. So I just wanted to make sure that you all understand and are aware that when it comes to the synthetics, you're looking at in orders of 100 to 1,000 micrograms, which is up to a milligram. And then for the orals, you are looking at 10 milligrams a day of product. Okay, modulation. I alluded to this earlier. The superpower of the bioregulator peptides is they don't boost, they don't suppress, they restore. So they're looking to bring homeostasis back to the system. And that is a big part of the reason why they're seen as having such a high safety profile. Doesn't mean that nobody can ever have a poor reaction, but I can tell you that it is very rare that I see people have a bad reaction to a bioregulator. Again, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Everybody's different. But what this does mean is, for example, with the thyroid bioregulator, we can give the thyroid bioregulator to someone who's either a hypo or hyperthyroid, and it will help to, in either case, it'll help to normalize thyroid function, which is very different than, for example, when you're using a thyroid medication, which you can't use in both cases. All right, so I thought I would share a little bit of Cavinson's research with you. The most powerful, not going to say the most powerful, but the most well-known studies that he did a first study called the elderly study. This was a 12-year study with 60 to 74-year-old people. He had a couple hundred people in here. He had a control group and a test subjects. The test subjects were given injections of epithalamin for 2 years. The control group were given injections of polyvitamins for 2 years. At the end of 6 years, we had 13.6% mortality in the control group versus 8.5% mortality in the epithalamin group. He checked in with them after 12 years. And check this out. Your control group had a 44% mortality rate, only half that mortality rate in the epithalamin group. So he was pretty sure that he was onto something. He then decided, okay, we can do this. 6-year study with 65 to 85-year-old adults. Same thing. Our control group is getting polyvitamin injections. Our test subjects are getting epithalamin injections. But then he brought in a third group, and those people got epithalamin and thymolin. So both the thymus and the pineal gland bioregulators. And the results here were crazy. After 6 years, 88.1% mortality in his control group, 44% mortality in the epithalamin group. So it was pretty consistent with the last one. But check out epithalamin and the thymus bioregulator. We're down to 33% mortality in that group. So they did even better. So pretty powerful results. What's even more fun is that they actually were also healthier. So they reported better sleep. They had better immune function, increased bone density. Really interesting. Better sense of well-being, improved melatonin production, improved cardiovascular function, as well as endocrine function. Now, all of these things tie in. Obviously, you guys can know this. If we can get our circadian rhythm back online, if we can get our thymus gland working, if we can improve our melatonin production and improve telomeres, then all of these things should be a natural fallout. And indeed, that's what we saw. All right. I wanted to also share a couple of clinical trial kind of applications that is published. We have in traumatic brain injury using pineolon. So this is the central nervous system brain bioregulator. 72 patients between the ages of 3 to 74 years old. So this is also really interesting. In Russia, they will use bioregulators with children, not just adults. Not that you would give a child a bioregulator who doesn't have something going on, obviously, but in extreme cases, they would do that. So pineolon by mouth twice a day, 200 micrograms for 30 days. And now here's the other interesting point. Bioregulators work really, really nicely with conventional treatment. So just because somebody's undergoing conventional treatment doesn't mean that the bioregulator can't be woven in as well. We had a control group of 37 patients that were only getting the conventional therapies. And then we had our test subject who got the conventional therapy along with the bioregulator. And the test subject showed a reduction in duration as well as intensity of headaches, better memory, speech, information processing, as well as emotional stability. So all in all, our test subjects who got the bioregulator did better than the control group. Then there's another clinical trial with Cartilax, the cartilage bioregulator. And here we were looking really at joints. So 63 patients between the ages of 45 to 78 years old. It was combined again with conventional treatment. People either were suffering with osteoarthritis, osteochondrosis, or osteoporosis. The controls only received conventional treatment. The test subjects experienced reduced pain and increased mobility of joints in 65 to 72% of cases. So there's really no downside here, right? You're just going to get a stacking of benefits. Now, I don't know how many of you guys are aware of Bill Lawrence. Bill Lawrence is an American guy, yeah, a couple hands up, who worked very, very closely with Professor Cavinson until Professor Cavinson's passing away. And Bill Lawrence has been conducting human trials now for, I want to say, almost 5 years. And he's looking at DNA methylation. So these were the 2-year study results. I think it's time for me to get him back onto the podcast. He was here. He had 124 participants. And after 2 years, they saw an average decrease in epigenetic age of almost 5 years, which represents an all-cause mortality risk reduction of over 50% as well. And even those that were using bioregulators prior to the study continued to improve their longevity. So it seems that it's going to move the needle. And I think that what's also really interesting is the biggest impacts that we see are in older people. And there's not a lot of therapies that we can say that for, right? Very often, older people will see less impact just because, their bodies are more tired or their systems have more challenges to deal with. With these bioregulator peptides, we actually often see a bigger upswing with more elderly populations. What's interesting here also is that Bill Lawrence is developing his own theory, which he actually discussed quite extensively with Professor Cavinson, and it's that could the key benefit of these bioregulator peptides ultimately be the restoration of the ability of DNA to repair itself? Because we know the DNA damage is a huge piece of the puzzle when it comes to aging. So could we possibly be helping the DNA to restore itself more effectively? Also, he's been looking at telomere, and this is where he's seen massive, massive benefits. Shortened telomeres associated with the increased risk of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and accelerated aging. The average decrease in biological age that he saw after 3 years in his population was over 20 years and these are just run-of-the-mill people, folks. These are just people these are just regular people, just like me and you. So now there were a few people in the telomere study that did not see any improvement. And why? Guess what? Both people who didn't see improvement were under massive, massive levels of stress. So if there's one thing you want to take away from this today is get out, get dancing, learn to manage your stress, learn to breathe, learn to meditate, do all the things you need to do to mitigate the impact of stress on your physiology. So I'm skipping a couple of slides here because I'm going to run out of time. I'm sure that people are in the corner screaming, "You're overtime, Nat. Stop talking." So just a couple of things that I've seen in my own communities is, for example, for prostate health, 86-year-old man who literally could not get through a night without getting up to go to the bathroom at least 5 times. We gave him the oral prostate bioregulator. So this was the natural extract. He did a 30-day course and then monthly 10-day courses for another 3 months after that. But after the first 30 days, he noticed a massive decrease in nighttime visits to the bathroom. He went down to like once. Now, we did a stack here. We did the prostate with the blood vessel bioregulator. We've also seen women experiencing restoration of their menstrual cycle. Now, this is not postmenopausal women. We're talking about younger women that were still cycling, who for any number of reasons had lost their cycle. We use the pineal gland and the ovarian bioregulator, sometimes for as little as 30 days. And then sometimes they still needed a little extra push on 10 days a month. But a number of young women we've seen, this was what they needed to move the needle and get their cycles back. There's a lot of words here. The net here is, this is a woman in one of my communities who'd been dealing with Hashimoto's for years with her naturopath. And she did it all. She changed her diet. She used LDN. She did all the things. And it wasn't until she brought in the thyroid bioregulator that all of a sudden her naturopath was like, "You are in remission." So they can be really, really powerful. So I'm just going to put these up here. If somebody want, I'm going to talk really fast now. So they are most commonly used in stacks. We very often will do when we start someone, particularly when they have some kind of an issue that we're trying to move the needle on, we're going to start with 30-day induction periods. So we're going to use them for 30 days, and then we'll do 10-day cycles a month following that. Or if somebody doesn't have any kind of issues, we might just do 10-day cycles a month for once every quarter or every 6 months, depending on the situation. I'm going to remind you, don't forget about those names. Be specific about which form of the peptide you're using. So the ultimate healthy aging stack, in my humble opinion, is the pineal gland, the thymus gland, and the blood vessel. If I was going to add a fourth here, I would probably add the brain bioregulator as well. And I would do 30 days, 2 caps a day of each. If you're under the age of 50, I might do that. Well, if you're between the ages of 40 to 50, I might do this kind of twice a year. Over the age of 60, I might be tempted to go every quarter. The ultimate brain health stack, we're going to have the pineal gland bioregulator, the central nervous system bioregulator, and we're going to want to make sure that blood flow is taken care of. And this does not preclude all the other things you know you need to do for your brain. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. Metabolic health, liver, pancreas, bioregulator, and blood vessel. I have seen people's blood sugar improve after doing this stack remarkably. Okay, we don't have time to get into GHK-Cu, but GHK-Cu is a 3 amino acid peptide, and it is probably the forgotten bioregulator. It simply wasn't discovered by Dr. Cavinson, but it was discovered by Dr. Pickert in 1973. There are thousands of papers on this peptide. It affects over 4,000 genes. It increased or decreased gene expression up or down more than 50% in 32% of the human genes that were studied. It is crazy. There's evidence that GHK reverses the gene silencing that drives aging. It's currently being studied for the treatment of certain cancers. It is being used to treat neurodegenerative disease, and it has the ability to deliver non-toxic copper into brain cells. It's powerful for wound healing and tissue remodeling. It plays a role in healing of nerves, stimulates the production of collagen and elastin. It's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. I will tell you that every single time I go into PubMed and look up GHK, I learn about something new. It is nuts what this one peptide can do. So it goes without saying that if you don't take care of all these other things, your bioregulators are not going to be able to do their thing. So I'm not going to bore you with this slide, but I'm just going to remind you that as magical as bioregulators sound, we have to take care of the house and the vibe in the house in order for them to be able to do their work. We want to mind our cells. We want to make sure that we take care of our cellular health. We deal with the toxins. We want to pick these powerful lifestyle habits, whether it's sauna, deliberate cold exposure, fasting, morning light, all the things. We want to remember, and this is that we're at a time where we can measure almost anything, right? We can measure our down to mitochondrial function. It is incredible the metrics that we can start measuring as we're bringing these interventions to play. But whatever you do, pick a test and stick with it. And the best things in life are free. Gratitude, joy, community, and purpose are the underpinnings and the reason why all of you guys are there in person, because it is community that is going to be one of the most powerful things that's going to help us to age well. Thank you. I'm sorry I went so long. I'm Nathalie Niddam, and I host the Longevity Podcast. Woo! So, unfortunately, I didn't leave any time for questions. I'm so sorry, Mariana.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I know you're pressed to go, but I do want you all to get that information. I know your podcast is like a well of information. I've listened to several of your episodes, and they're just fantastic. It's just amazing. Thank you for your time today, Jim. You wanted to say hello?
Hi, Natalie. This is Jim Stroh.
Hi, Jim. Sorry I went so long.
Well, we forgive you because of such great information. You've done a great job. Yeah, I just appreciate you coming on and doing this. You're very informative. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, come
Thank
visit
you
us
so much.
sometime. We'd love to have you here in person. And
I'd be
yeah,
happy to.
but thank you
Way
again.
more fun in person. It's all about community,
That's
right?
right. That's right. You experience the community, but yeah. But thanks again.
100%. Thank you. And Happy New Year to you all.
Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year. Bye bye.
Bye.